Hello, students of class 6. Welcome back to our social science class. So, today, as I told you in the last class, we will be moving on into our term 2 book. So, I hope you're all clear with the lessons that were taught in the term 1 book. Now, we are getting into the term 2 book. So, today we will be looking at History Lesson 1 from the Term 2 book. So, the lesson 1 is Vedic Culture in North India and Megalithic Culture in South India. So, this is the topic of our today's lesson. So, today we will be getting an overview of the Vedic culture, that is, how it came in. Then we will be knowing about the people who lived in the Vedic age and about their occupation and so on. So now let's get into our class. So first, you might be wondering what is a Vedic age and when was Vedic age started? So a Vedic age is nothing but it is the age that came after the Indus civilization. So once the urbanization in India came to an end with the decline of Indus civilization, a new period began. So that period is called as the Vedic age. So it began with the arrival of the Aryans. So this age was between the period of 1500 BC to 600 BC. So this Vedic age was started in history between 1500 BC to 600 BC. So the name Vedic age came from the four Vedas. So they followed the Vedas, and that's how they named themselves their period as the Vedic age. So Vedic age was nothing but the new period when the Aryans came in. So now the Vedic age is divided into two phases. So the first one is early Vedic period and the second one is later Vedic period. So the two classifications are early and later. So when was the early Vedic age? It was from 1500 to 1000 BC. So 1500 to 1000 BC was early. And when was the later Vedic age? It was 1000 to 600 BC. So 1500 to 1000 was early. 1000 to 600 was later. So the Vedic age totally was from 1500 to 600 BC. And within that it is classified into early and later. So moving on, let's know about the people. So we saw that they were called as Aryans, right? So who are these Aryans? The Aryans were Indo-Aryan language speaking. So they spoke a language called Indo-Aryan language. And they were mostly semi-nomadic pastoralists. That is, they had cattle, they had cow, they had sheep, they had goats, and so on. So what they did was they never stayed in one place. Instead, they took their goats, sheep, and all their cattle and they went in search for grass and the food for cattle. So they were semi-nomadic, meaning they never had a proper place. They kept on moving from one place to another. And pastoralists is they had cattle and they went with it. They moved mainly for their cattle, that is their goat and sheep, because it might not have food in the same place for a long time. So they took their cattle and moved on searching for food. So Aryans were Indo-Aryan language speaking people and semi-nomadic pastoralists. So they came from Central Asia in several waves of migration through Khyber Pass of Hindu Kush mountains. So they weren't born there. These people came from Central Asia. They migrated, that is, they came from Central Asia and several other places because they wanted probably food. So they came through the Khyber Pass, that is a mountain, Khyber Pass of Hindu Kush mountains. So they came through the mountains directly to this place. Cattle rearing was their main occupation. They also practiced slash and burn agriculture. So what is cattle rearing? Yes, they had cattle, cow, goat, sheep, and many more probably. They had all this and they took care of it. They used to feed the cows, they used to give good grass, water, and then they rear it. And what is slash and burn agriculture? It is a farming method that involves clearing the land by cutting and burning all the trees and plants on it. Cultivation is done there for a short time and abandoned. People then move to new piece of land for cultivation. So what is slash and burn agriculture? So here slash and burn means they will look at a place. So like for example, they will get to see a forest. They will go cut down all the trees, all the plants. They will cut down everything and then they will sow seeds in that land. After sowing seeds, when they get the produce, that is when they get what they have sown, they will take it, and for a short time, that is for few years, they will use that land for sowing and reaping. After that, after doing agriculture there for few days or few years, after getting good grains, food and all, what they do is they leave the land. They don't even look after the land. They leave the land and they start moving to another land. Like we saw, they are semi-nomadic. That is, they keep moving. When they see the land, they go, burn it, burn the place, and then they sow, they reap, they eat, and then again after some time they leave that land and then they move on. So this is the main occupation of Aryans. So they were people who did not stay in one place. Like we all stay in Chennai, right? In one place. They are not like that. They keep moving to different places. One day they will be here, another day they will be somewhere else. So they are semi-nomadic people. And they speak Indo-Aryan language. Their main occupation is cattle rearing, but as a side thing, they practice slash and burn agriculture for their food. So now we are able to know who are Aryans. Moving on to the next. Let's look at the extent of Vedic culture. So here in the map we see the early Vedic culture and the later Vedic period, right? So there are two periods as we learnt, early and the later. So early is marked in green color and the later in light lime green color. Okay, so there you see in the map, right? The green color, that is the early Vedic period. The people lived there in the early Vedic period and then they moved here to the Ayodhya side in the later Vedic period. So these are, as we saw in the classification, early and later. This is how they lived, early there and later. Vedic period happened in the next place near Ayodhya. So moving on, let's see what were the home of Aryans. So already, like we saw, these people were semi-nomadic. So they did not have a particular home. They kept moving from place to place. Okay, so they took their family, they took their cattle and everything, and they moved from one place to another place in search of food. So they considered cattle as their wealth. They did not want money, they did not want jewels, they did not want anything, but what they considered as wealth was their cattle. So they did not have home, anything. They kept moving, but they had their cattle with them wherever they went. So in the Rig Vedic times, the Aryan homeland was Punjab. So earlier they lived in Punjab, and which was at that time called Sapta Sindhu, the land of 7 rivers. So in those days, Punjab was called as Sapta Sindhu. Why did they call it as Sapta Sindhu? Because it had 7 rivers in it. So it was called as Sapta Sindhu. So Aryan homeland is basically Punjab. Around 1000 BC, Aryans in India moved eastward and settled in Indo-Gangetic plain. Use of iron axes and plows became widespread. So as they started moving from one place to another, they settled in Indo-Gangetic plain, and they started using iron axes and plows to cut down trees and to sow their land. To plow their land, they started using plows. So this became famous for them. So we learned what is Vedic Age. We have learnt about the Aryans and the homeland of Aryans. So moving on now, we'll be able to know about the Vedic literature. The Shrutis comprise of 4 Vedas: the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. They are considered sacred, eternal, and unquestionable truth. So these people followed the main literature, that is Shrutis. It meant that we have to listen. So it means Shruti means listening. So these were transmitted orally through generations. So it comprises of Vedas, Brahmanas, and Aranyakas and Upanishads. That is the 4 main books that they followed. So they combined into the Shrutis. So where did they get these Shrutis from? From their ancestors. So from their ancestors, from the stories they said, everything, they started listening and they got these Shrutis. A body of texts containing teachings and religious such as Itihas, Puranas, Tantras and Agamas. Smritis are not eternal. They are constantly revised. Smriti means definite and written literature. So just like Shrutis, they also had another literature called Smritis. That is, it had teachings on religion. So they are not eternal. They are just definite and written literature. So we heard that Shrutis are, yes, they are listening, but Smriti is written literature. So the two literature are Shruti and Smriti. Shruti is listening, Smriti is written. So they are the 2 types of literature, that is Vedic literature, that the Aryans followed. So moving on to the next one, the Vedic text. So like we saw Shruti and Smriti. So here you get to know about it in detail. So the four Vedas, Shruti consists of four Vedas, Aranyakas, Brahmanas, Upanishads. Smriti consists of Itihas, Puranas, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Shiva Purana, Vishnu Purana, and Sutras, that is Dharma Sutra, Manusmriti, Narada Smriti. So these are the texts that the main Vedic text contain, Shruti and Smriti, and then they are classified into so many things. So they might be looking like just a small thing, but these two classification has so many inside it. So there are a lot of information, and this is the literature books that they followed. Moving on is various places which has archaeological evidence of Vedic age. Just like how we saw about the Indus civilization, how did we come to know about the Indus civilization? We found few pots, broken pots, then dolls, and so many, right? Just like that, the material remains such as iron implements and pottery, which were found in Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and the places along the Indus and Ganges, proved that the Vedic period was also there and the Aryans lived in these places. So, what were the evidence? Iron implements, pottery. So, these were the two main evidence that the archaeologists found out, and thus they have proved that there were peoples living there called Aryans, and they belong to the Vedic age. So now we got to know about the Vedic age, the classification of Vedic age, and the archaeological evidence also we got to know. And we got to know about the Aryans, that is the people who lived in the Vedic age, right? We now know about how they lived their lifestyle, that is their homeland, that is Punjab, and then their occupation. We knew about their literature, Vedic text, and all, right? So, this is all about the basic details of the Vedic age and the Aryans. So in our next class, we will be getting into a detailed study of this. So that's all for today's class, students. Thank you. Take care until we meet in the next class.